Lisa Turner checked her watch for the third time in 5 minutes. The early morning flight from Los Angeles to New York was running behind schedule, and she could feel the tension building among the passengers lined up at the gate. After 8 years as a flight attendant with Pacific Sky Airways, she knew exactly how a 40-minute delay could turn even the most mild-mannered travelers into irritable complainers. "Ladies and gentlemen, we apologize for the delay. We're now beginning the boarding process for Flight 372 to New York," the gate agent announced, and Lisa took a deep breath. This was going to be one of those days. Lisa stood by the aircraft door, greeting passengers with a practiced smile that hid her own tiredness. She'd been up since 3:30 a.m. for this flight, and the coffee in her system was already wearing off. Still, she maintained her professionalism as business travelers filed past her, many already tapping away at their phones or adjusting their earbuds to tune out the world. "Good morning. Welcome aboard," she repeated, making brief eye contact with each person who passed. Most barely acknowledged her, but she didn't take it personally. Monday morning flights were always full of people with meetings to prepare for and deals to close. By the time the economy passengers started boarding, Lisa had already dealt with 3 seating disputes in first class, and a passenger who insisted his oversized carry-on would fit in the overhead compartment. It didn't. Her colleague Raj handled the back section of the plane while she managed the front, coordinating with the senior flight attendant, Vicky, who was checking that all the meal carts were properly stocked. As the final passengers trickled in, Lisa noticed a man in a worn gray sweater and jeans making his way down the aisle. Unlike most of the sharply dressed business travelers, he had a casual, almost rumpled appearance. He carried a battered leather messenger bag and moved with an unhurried calm that seemed out of place among the rush of impatient passengers. What caught Lisa's attention wasn't his clothes, but his eyes, kind, observant, taking in everything around him with genuine interest rather than impatience. "CC is on the right side, halfway down," she said helpfully, when he paused to check his boarding pass. "Thanks," he replied with a smile that reached his eyes. "Long morning already?" The simple acknowledgement of her as a person, rather than just part of the plane's fixtures, caught her by surprise. "That obvious, huh?" she said with a small laugh. "The secret's in the coffee grip," he replied, nodding toward her hand, which was indeed clutching her staff cup like a lifeline. "I know that hold well." Lisa found herself smiling genuinely for the first time that morning as he continued down the aisle to his seat. Passengers who actually saw flight attendants as people were rare enough to be noteworthy. Once everyone was seated and the safety demonstration completed, the plane pushed back from the gate. Captain Reynolds announced their flight time of 5 hours and 45 minutes to New York, mentioning they might encounter some turbulence over the Midwest, but that he'd do his best to find a smooth route. The first hour of the flight passed uneventfully. Lisa served drinks in first class while Vicky and Raj handled the main cabin. She was just finishing when Vicky approached her. "Hey, can you take the coffee service for rows 10 through 20? I need to deal with a passenger who's having an allergic reaction." "Sure thing," Lisa replied, quickly preparing a cart with coffee, cream, and sugar. She carefully navigated the narrow aisle, serving passengers efficiently row by row. The plane had been cruising smoothly, but as she approached row 14, she felt the first shudder beneath her feet. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking." Reynolds' voice came over the intercom. "We're hitting some unexpected turbulence. I've turned on the fasten seatbelt sign, so please return to your seats and secure your seatbelts." Lisa had just reached the man in the gray sweater, 14C, and was carefully pouring his requested black coffee when the plane dropped suddenly. Her stomach lurched as the aircraft fell what felt like 20 feet in less than a second. The coffee pot jumped in her hand, sending hot liquid splashing across the tray. The plane bucked again violently and Lisa lost her balance. She tried to steady herself against the seat, but the motion was too sudden. The half-filled coffee cup flipped over, and before she could catch it, both the remaining coffee in the pot and what was in the cup splashed directly onto the lap of the quiet man. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry," Lisa gasped as the dark liquid spread across his jeans and what appeared to be important papers on his tray table. The coffee had to be painfully hot, but the man barely flinched. Instead, he quickly lifted his messenger bag to protect it from the spill and used his free hand to catch Lisa's arm, stopping her from falling into the passenger across the aisle. The plane continued to shake, and Lisa found herself half-crouched, half-leaning against seat 14C, mortified as coffee dripped from the tray onto the floor. "Are you okay?" the man asked, his focus entirely on her rather than the mess or his soaked clothes. "Am I okay? Sir, I just spilled hot coffee all over you." Lisa couldn't believe he was asking about her welfare. He shrugged slightly. "I've had worse Monday mornings. And you didn't spill it, the turbulence did." The plane steadied enough for Lisa to stand upright. She immediately grabbed napkins from her cart and offered them to him. "I'm so sorry about your papers," she said, noticing the coffee had soaked through several documents that looked like spreadsheets and financial reports. "Don't worry about it," he replied, dabbing at the papers without much urgency. "Digital backups for everything important. The jeans have seen worse days, too." As Lisa helped clean up the mess, she couldn't help but notice that while other passengers might have demanded compensation, or at least made their displeasure known, this man seemed genuinely unbothered. He carefully moved his coffee-stained papers to the side and even helped her mop up the spill on the tray table. "I can bring you a blanket to put over your lap. Or maybe we have some club soda that might help with the stain," Lisa offered, still feeling terrible about the incident. "Actually, some more coffee would be great if possible," he said with a slight smile. "In a cup with a lid this time, maybe?" Lisa couldn't help but laugh at his easy humor. "Coming right up, and I promise not to wear it this time." As she prepared a fresh cup of coffee with a secure lid, Lisa observed the man from the corner of her eye. He'd returned to reviewing the documents that hadn't been ruined by the spill, making notes in the margins with a pencil rather than the expensive pens many business travelers flashed. There was something different about him, a calm centeredness that stood out in the often hectic environment of air travel. When she returned with his coffee, he thanked her warmly. "I didn't catch your name," he said as he accepted the cup. "Lisa," she replied, surprised again by his personal approach. "Thanks." "Lisa, I'm Tom." He offered his hand and she shook it briefly, noticing calluses that suggested he worked with his hands, unusual for someone reviewing financial documents. "Well, Tom, let me know if you need anything else. The least I can do after baptizing you with our premium coffee blend." He chuckled at that. "Will do, and really, don't worry about it." Throughout the rest of the flight, Lisa found herself paying special attention to seat 14C. Tom spent most of the journey working intently on his remaining documents, occasionally gazing out the window with a thoughtful expression. Unlike many passengers who treated the cabin crew like walking vending machines, he always looked up when she passed by, acknowledging her with a nod or smile. During the meal service, she noticed he declined the premium meal option that had been mistakenly offered to him. "Economy meal is fine," he told Raj. "Save the good stuff for the folks who paid for it." This further piqued Lisa's curiosity. Most passengers would grab any free upgrade they could. Yet as the flight progressed, the coffee incident became a small joke between them. When she came through the cabin to collect trash, he handed her his empty cup and said, "Look, all gone. No casualties this time." Lisa found herself wondering about this unusual passenger. Was he a teacher? Maybe a small business owner? He didn't have the entitled air of a corporate executive, but the documents he was reviewing looked serious and complex. She'd seen enough business travelers to recognize financial reports, even upside down and coffee-stained. What she didn't, no, what she couldn't possibly have guessed, as the plane began its descent into New York, was that her worst customer service moment of the day was about to become the most surprising turn in her career. The plane touched down at JFK with a gentle bump, tires chirping against the wet runway. Outside the windows, New York greeted them with a typical September drizzle, the kind that wasn't heavy enough for umbrellas but would still soak you through after a few minutes. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to New York's John F. Kennedy International Airport," Lisa announced over the intercom. "Local time is 2:17 p.m. and the temperature is 64 degrees with light rain. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened until the captain turns off the seatbelt sign." As the plane taxied toward the gate, Lisa noticed Tom in 14C gathering his coffee-stained papers. He slipped them into a plastic folder from his bag, his movements unhurried even as other passengers around him started reaching for the overhead bins despite the illuminated seatbelt sign. Once the plane reached the gate and the seatbelt sign dinged off, the usual rush began. Passengers jumped to their feet, pulling down bags and jostling for position in the aisle. Lisa moved through the cabin, helping where needed and saying goodbye to passengers. When she reached row 14, Tom was still seated, letting the crowd thin out before standing. "Smart move," Lisa said. "I never understand the rush just to stand in the jetway for 10 minutes. Tom smiled. "One of the perks of not having a connection to catch, though I do have these stylish coffee-spotted jeans to show off in the terminal now." He gestured to the dark stains on his lap. Lisa winced. "I still feel terrible about that. If you give me your contact information, the airline can compensate you for cleaning or replacement." "Don't worry about it," he said, waving away her concern. "These jeans have seen plenty of coffee spills before, though usually I'm the one doing the spilling." He stood and retrieved a small carry-on from the overhead bin. "Thanks for a good flight, coffee shower and all." As Tom joined the last passengers filtering toward the exit, Lisa's work phone buzzed with a message. It was from Vicky, the senior flight attendant. "Captain wants all crew to stay on board after passengers deplane." VIP meeting. Lisa frowned. Post-flight crew meetings usually meant someone had complained or there was a policy change to discuss. After the coffee incident, she had a sinking feeling this might involve her. The last passengers, including Tom, filed out of the aircraft. Lisa noticed he paused briefly at the cockpit door, exchanging a few words with someone inside before continuing into the jetway. Strange, she thought. Most passengers didn't chat with the flight crew on their way out. Once the plane was empty, Lisa joined Raj and Vicky near the front galley. Captain Reynolds emerged from the cockpit with First Officer Daniels, both looking unusually formal. "What's going on?" Lisa whispered to Raj. He shrugged. "No idea. But the captain got a call from headquarters right after we landed." Captain Reynolds cleared his throat. "Thank you all for staying behind. We've just been informed that we had a special passenger on board today." He glanced down at a note in his hand. "The owner of Pacific Sky Airways was on our flight, traveling incognito to observe our operations firsthand." Lisa felt her stomach drop. An undercover boss situation, and she dumped coffee all over them. "Perfect. He'll be returning to the aircraft momentarily to speak with us," Reynolds continued. "Apparently he does this randomly throughout the year on different routes, flying economy to experience the airline as regular passengers do." Vicky looked alarmed. "Who was it? Did anyone notice?" "Seat 14C, First Officer Daniels said. Lisa felt the blood drain from her face. "The man in the gray sweater? The one I spilled coffee all over?" Captain Reynolds nodded grimly. "That would be him. Thomas Harrington." The name hit Lisa like a bucket of ice water. Thomas Harrington, the billionaire who had purchased the struggling Pacific Sky Airways 2 years ago and turned it around. His face occasionally appeared in company newsletters or business magazines, but those photos always showed him in tailored suits at formal events, not in worn jeans and a casual sweater on an economy flight. "I'm toast," Lisa muttered. Raj patted her shoulder sympathetically. "If it helps, I heard he's actually pretty decent. Not your typical executive." Before anyone could offer more reassurance, the aircraft door reopened. Tom, no, Mr. Harrington, stepped back onto the plane. Up close and knowing who he was now, Lisa could see subtle signs she'd missed before. The quiet confidence, the observant eyes that missed nothing, the way he carried himself like someone used to being in charge. Yet he was still wearing those coffee-stained jeans, and his smile remained as genuine as it had been throughout the flight. "Thank you all for waiting," he said. His voice the same friendly tone he'd used with Lisa earlier. "I hope Captain Reynolds explained why I'm here." Captain Reynolds stepped forward to shake his hand. "Mr. Harrington, it's an honor. We weren't expecting you on this flight." "That's rather the point," Tom replied good-naturedly. "Hard to get an authentic experience when everyone's treating you differently." His eyes met Lisa's and she saw a flicker of amusement there. "Though I usually don't get quite such an immersive experience." Lisa wanted to disappear into the floor panels. "About that, sir," Captain Reynolds began, clearly preparing to smooth over what he assumed was a customer service disaster. "The turbulence was unexpected and," Tom held up a hand. "The turbulence was significant and your handling of it was excellent. I've been on flights where pilots didn't warn us nearly as promptly." He turned to the cabin crew, "And all of you managed the situation professionally. Which brings me to why I'm here." He leaned against the back of a first-class seat, casual despite being the man who signed all their paychecks. "I fly on my own planes regularly, sometimes in first class when I have meetings to prepare for, but often in economy. I want to know what our passengers experience, not what people think I want to hear in reports. Today's flight was particularly interesting. Lisa braced herself, certain he was about to make an example of the coffee incident. "Lisa," he said, turning directly to her. She straightened automatically. That moment when the turbulence hit and coffee went everywhere could have gone very differently. "Sir, I'm truly sorry about—" He shook his head, cutting her off gently. "I'm not looking for an apology. What impressed me was what happened after. You were embarrassed, sure, but your first concern wasn't covering your mistake or blaming the turbulence. You immediately focused on making it right and making sure I was okay." Lisa blinked in surprise. This was not the dressing down she'd expected. "That's what we need more of at Pacific Sky," Tom continued. "People who see customers as humans first, not just seat numbers. I watched how you interacted with everyone in your section, not just me. You remember names, notice details, treat people with genuine care." He turned to address the whole crew. "That's what saved this airline. When I bought Pacific Sky, it was failing not because the planes were bad or the routes unprofitable, but because somewhere along the way, it had lost the human connection with passengers. Numbers on a spreadsheet became more important than people in the seats." Tom reached into his messenger bag and pulled out a slightly coffee-stained folder. "The documents that got soaked? They're passenger satisfaction reports. The numbers have been improving since we changed our approach, but there's still work to do." He handed each crew member a business card. "I'd like all of you to email me directly with your observations from today's flight. What worked well? What could be improved? Don't sugarcoat it. I get enough of that from management." When he handed Lisa her card, he added quietly, "And I'd particularly like to hear your thoughts on how we can better support our crew during unexpected situations." The entire interaction felt surreal. Lisa had been certain she was about to be reprimanded, possibly even fired. Instead, the owner of the airline was asking for her professional opinion. After Tom left, the crew stood in stunned silence for several moments. "Did that really just happen?" Raj finally asked. Vicky examined the business card with Tom's direct email address. "Apparently so." "I can't believe I spent the whole flight worrying about a coffee spill when I should have been networking with the boss," Lisa said. Half joking to mask her lingering embarrassment, Captain Reynolds chuckled. "I think you made a better impression by being genuine than you would have schmoozing. Though next time, maybe aim the coffee at the seat, not the CEO." As they gathered their belongings to head to the hotel for their overnight stay, Lisa couldn't stop thinking about the encounter. She'd been a flight attendant for 8 years, and this was the first time an executive, let alone the owner, had shown real interest in the day-to-day reality of the job. Back in her hotel room, Lisa kept looking at Tom's business card. Unlike the ornate, embossed cards she occasionally received from first-class passengers eager to show off their status, this one was simple. Just his name, title, and contact information on plain cardstock. Like the man himself, it was unpretentious but substantial. She opened her laptop and began typing an email, determined to make the most of this unexpected opportunity. As she wrote, Lisa reflected on her initial impression of Tom. She'd noticed something different about him even before knowing who he was, a genuineness that stood out in the artificial environment of air travel. Perhaps that explained how he'd transformed a failing airline into one of the industry's success stories in just 2 years. He hadn't just changed policies. He'd changed the culture by example. Lisa finished her email with suggestions she'd been thinking about for months but never thought would reach anyone who could implement them. For the first time in years, she felt like her voice might actually matter. She pressed send, still not quite believing that the man she'd accidentally soaked with coffee was now reading her ideas for improving the company. The most embarrassing moment of her recent career had somehow turned into a potential turning point. As Lisa drifted off to sleep that night, she wondered what would come of her email. Probably nothing, she thought realistically. Even the most down-to-earth CEO had bigger concerns than one flight attendant's suggestions. She had no way of knowing that her honest feedback would land in Tom's inbox at the exact moment he was reconsidering how the airline gathered passenger insights or that her coffee mishap was about to change the trajectory of her career. 2 weeks passed, and Lisa had almost convinced herself that her encounter with Thomas Harrington was just a strange blip in her career. A good story to tell at crew gatherings, but nothing more. She'd sent her email the night after the flight as requested, pouring her thoughts into a message that ended up being much longer than she'd intended. After hitting send, she'd immediately worried it was too much, too honest, maybe even unprofessional. But what did professionalism even mean when you'd already dumped hot coffee on the CEO? The morning after sending her email, she'd checked her inbox obsessively, but no reply came. By the third day, she'd stopped checking. By the end of the first week, she'd nearly forgotten about it. Life returned to its familiar rhythm of pre-dawn wake-up calls, safety demonstrations, drink services, and hotel rooms that all started to look the same after a while. Today, she was working a short domestic hop from Chicago to Detroit. The weather was clear, the flight was on time, and most passengers were either dozing or tapping away on laptops. A perfectly ordinary Tuesday until her phone buzzed with an email notification during her break. The sender, Thomas Harrington. Lisa nearly dropped her phone. She glanced around the galley as if someone might be watching her, then opened the message with slightly shaking fingers. Ms. Turner, it began formally. Thank you for your thoughtful email following our encounter on Flight 372. Your insights were not only helpful but have sparked an important conversation at our executive level about passenger experience measurement. I'm particularly interested in your suggestion about creating dedicated customer experience teams at each hub. Lisa stared at the words, remembering that part of her email. She'd suggested that instead of relying on automated surveys that most passengers ignored, the airline should have small teams at major hubs who could gather real-time feedback and observe how policies actually worked in practice. The email continued. I'd like to discuss this further with you. Would you be available for a video call this Friday at 10 a.m. Eastern? If your flying schedule conflicts, please suggest an alternative time. Regards, Thomas Harrington. Short, direct, and completely unexpected. Lisa read it 3 times to make sure she wasn't misunderstanding. The owner of Pacific Sky Airways wanted to have a meeting with her, a regular flight attendant, about her ideas. She quickly checked her schedule. Friday was supposed to be her day off, which meant she could take the call from home rather than trying to find a quiet corner in some airport. Everything okay? Asked Pete, another flight attendant who had noticed her frozen expression. I think so, Lisa replied, still staring at her phone. The CEO just emailed me about a meeting. Pete's eyebrows shot up. Harrington? The coffee guy? What did he say? He wants to talk about some suggestions I made. This Friday, Pete gave a low whistle. Must have been some coffee you spilled on him. Most of us have to work here 20 years before getting a direct line to the big boss. Lisa managed a weak smile. Guess I found a shortcut. Just dump hot beverages on billionaires. I'll try that next time one's on my flight, Pete laughed. Though knowing my luck, I'd get the kind that sues instead of schedules meetings. The rest of the flight passed in a blur. Lisa went through the motions of her job on autopilot, her mind racing with possibilities. What exactly did Tom want to discuss? Was this just a courtesy because she'd been embarrassed about the coffee incident? Or was he actually considering her ideas? Back at home Thursday evening, Lisa prepared for the video call like it was a job interview. She chose a professional but not overly formal outfit, set up her laptop in the brightest part of her small apartment, and even did a test run with her friend Danielle to make sure the background looked appropriate and her audio worked properly. You're overthinking this, Danielle told her after the third practice round. Just be yourself. That's what got his attention in the first place, right? Being myself got coffee all over his lap, Lisa pointed out. And yet here you are about to have a one-on-one with the big boss. Clearly you did something right. Friday morning arrived with Lisa's stomach in knots. At 9:55, she logged into the video platform specified in Tom's follow-up email. She took a deep breath, checked her appearance one last time, and waited. At exactly 10 the call connected. Thomas Harrington appeared on screen, looking much more like a CEO than he had on the plane. He wore a light blue button-down shirt instead of the casual sweater, and his background was clearly an office with a city skyline visible through large windows. Lisa, good morning. He greeted her with the same warm tone he'd used on the plane. Thanks for making time for this call. Good morning, Mr. Harrington, she replied, aiming for a balance of professional and friendly. Thank you for the invitation. Please call me Tom. I get enough formality in board meetings. He smiled, leaning back slightly in his chair. I wanted to follow up on your email personally because, frankly, it was the most insightful feedback I've received in months. Lisa felt her cheeks warm at the unexpected praise. I'm glad it was helpful. I was worried it might have been too direct, Tom laughed. Direct is exactly what I need. Too many people tell me what they think I want to hear. Your suggestions about measuring customer experience hit on a problem we've been struggling with. He pulled up what appeared to be her email on his screen. You wrote, surveys don't capture the human element of travel. They measure transactions, not interactions. What if we had dedicated teams whose only job was to observe, engage, and report on the actual lived experience of our passengers? Hearing her own words read back to her by the CEO was surreal. Lisa nodded. It's something I've thought about for years. We see patterns from working the flights that might not show up in data. Exactly, Tom said, leaning forward with evident enthusiasm. And that brings me to the real reason for this call. I'm creating a new department focused exclusively on customer experience, and I want you to be part of it. Lisa blinked, certain she'd misheard. I'm sorry? I'm offering you a position, Tom clarified. You'd help build and eventually lead a team that implements the very approach you suggested. You'd still fly occasionally to stay connected to the frontline experience, but your primary role would be developing and overseeing these customer experience teams at our major hubs. The words hung in the air as Lisa tried to process them. This wasn't just a courtesy call. It was a job offer, and not for some minor role, but for a position that sounded like it reported directly to executive leadership. I don't know what to say, she finally managed. I'm not sure I'm qualified. I don't have management experience or an MBA or... Tom cut her off gently. You have 8 years of direct customer experience in our industry. You understand our passengers because you interact with hundreds of them every week. And most importantly, you notice things others miss. He smiled. Besides, sometimes the best qualification is spilling coffee on the right person. Despite her nervousness, Lisa laughed. I'm still not living that down, am I? Look at it this way, Tom said. That moment revealed more about your character than a dozen interviews could have. When things went wrong, you didn't make excuses or try to shift blame. You focused on making it right. That's exactly the mindset we need more of at this company. Lisa took a deep breath, the reality of the opportunity starting to sink in. Can I ask about the details? Salary, expectations, timeline? Of course. Tom outlined a compensation package that made Lisa's eyes widen. It was nearly double her current salary, plus benefits she'd never had access to before. He explained that the role would be based at headquarters in Chicago with regular travel to the hubs. She would start by shadowing executives to understand the company's operations from the business side, then work with him to build out her team. I know this is a lot to take in, Tom said as he finished the overview. You don't need to decide right now. Take the weekend to think about it. Talk to family or friends if you'd like. We can reconnect on Monday. Lisa nodded, still somewhat dazed by the unexpected turn her career might take. I will. Thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Tom. After the call ended, Lisa sat staring at her laptop screen for several minutes. The ordinary apartment around her suddenly seemed different, as if she were seeing it from the perspective of her future self looking back on this moment. She thought about her years as a flight attendant, the early mornings, the difficult passengers, the nights away from home, but also the places she'd seen, the people she'd met, the sense of family among crew members. She'd never planned to make it her lifelong career, but she'd never expected an exit ramp quite like this. Her phone buzzed with a text from Danielle. How did it go? Lisa typed back. He offered me a job at headquarters, leading a new department. Double my salary. The phone rang seconds later, Danielle's excited voice filling the room as Lisa recounted the details of the call. As she spoke, her initial shock began to give way to excitement. So are you going to take it? Danielle asked when Lisa finished explaining. I think I am, Lisa replied, surprising herself with how right the words felt. It's scary, but it's also exactly the kind of opportunity I've been waiting for. All because you spilled coffee on a billionaire. Danielle marveled. You know this is going to become company legend, right? People will be accidentally spilling drinks on executives for years trying to replicate your success. Lisa laughed, the tension of the past few hours finally breaking. Maybe we should put that in the employee handbook. Warning: coffee spilling as a career advancement strategy is not company approved. As the weekend progressed, Lisa's decision solidified. By Sunday evening, she was drafting her acceptance email, already imagining the projects she might tackle first. The nervousness was still there, but it had transformed into something else: anticipation. Sometimes life's biggest opportunities came from the most unexpected moments. Who would have thought that her worst in-flight mishap would lead to her biggest career break? 6 months flew by faster than any transatlantic flight Lisa had ever worked. Her first day at Pacific Sky's headquarters in Chicago had been a whirlwind of introductions, security badges, and trying to remember dozens of names while fighting the feeling that she had no business being there. Everyone's going to realize I'm just a flight attendant playing dress up, she'd confessed to Danielle over the phone. After that first overwhelming day, "Stop that." Danielle had replied firmly, "You're exactly where you belong. Tom didn't hire you despite your background. He hired you because of it." Those words became Lisa's mantra during the challenging early weeks. While she understood airplanes and passengers better than most executives ever would, the corporate world was entirely new territory. Financial reports, stakeholder presentations, and strategy meetings filled her calendar. She worked harder than she ever had, coming in early and staying late, determined to prove Tom's faith in her wasn't misplaced. Tom himself became an unexpected mentor. Despite his packed schedule, he made time for weekly check-ins where he patiently answered questions Lisa was sometimes embarrassed to ask. "There are no stupid questions," he told her during one particularly difficult week. "The only stupid thing is pretending to understand when you don't. That's how bad decisions get made." Gradually, Lisa found her footing. Her Customer Experience Initiative, or CEI as it came to be known, began taking shape. She hired a small team, deliberately choosing people with varied backgrounds: 2 former flight attendants like herself, a hotel concierge with a knack for solving problems, a data analyst who could translate customer feedback into actionable patterns, and a former social worker who understood how to truly listen to people. By month 4, they had pilot programs running at 3 major hubs. Instead of relying solely on post-flight surveys that most passengers ignored, CEI team members were on the ground, observing, engaging, and gathering real-time insights about the passenger experience. Everything from how people navigated the check-in process to their reactions when flights were delayed. Not everything went smoothly. Some department heads viewed the CEI with suspicion, seeing it as an intrusion on their territory or worse, a way for Tom to spy on their operations. Others simply dismissed it as a pet project that would fade away once Tom's attention shifted elsewhere. "They're waiting for us to fail," Lisa told her team during a particularly tough week, "so let's disappoint them by succeeding." Today marked 6 months since she'd started, and Lisa was preparing for her most important presentation yet, sharing the CEI's initial findings with the executive leadership team. As she reviewed her slides one final time in her office, her phone buzzed with a text from Tom. "Don't be nervous. Just tell the story the way you told it to me. They need to hear this." Lisa smiled gratefully at the message. Despite now working at the corporate headquarters and having an impressive title on her business card, she still sometimes felt like the flight attendant who had spilled coffee on the CEO's lap. Tom seemed to have a sixth sense for when those moments of doubt crept in. At exactly 2 p.m., Lisa walked into the boardroom. 12 executives in crisp suits sat around a gleaming table, most tapping on laptops or phones, barely acknowledging her entrance. Tom gave her an encouraging nod from his seat at the head of the table. "Good afternoon," Lisa began, her voice steadier than she felt. 6 months ago, our CEO took a flight in economy class and had coffee spilled on him." A few heads looked up, some with faint smiles. The coffee incident had become something of a legend within the company. What could have been just an embarrassing moment for a flight attendant, namely, me, instead became the starting point for reimagining how we understand our customers' experiences. Over the next 30 minutes, Lisa walked them through what her team had discovered. She showed videos of passengers struggling to use the check-in kiosks that the technology department had assured everyone were intuitive. She shared data on how a 5-minute delay in boarding cascaded into frantic connections and lost baggage. Most powerfully, she played audio clips of real passengers describing their journeys in their own words: the good, the bad, and the surprisingly emotional. "We've been measuring transactions," Lisa explained, echoing the words from her original email to Tom. "Not interactions. But people don't experience our airline as a series of data points. They experience it as a journey with actual human moments." As she moved through her presentation, Lisa noticed the executives' attitudes shifting. Phones were set aside. Skeptical expressions gave way to thoughtful nods. By the time she reached her final slides, concrete recommendations for immediate improvements, she had the room's full attention. In conclusion, Lisa said, the customer experience initiative isn't just about making passengers happier, though that matters tremendously. It's about making smarter business decisions based on how our services actually work in the real world, not just how they look on paper. When she finished, there was a moment of silence. Then the CFO, a stern woman who was known for her tough questions, spoke first. These changes you're suggesting, implementing them across all hubs will be expensive. Lisa had prepared for this. Yes, some will require investment, but we've calculated the potential return. She clicked to a slide she'd prepared with the data analyst on her team. Based on industry standards, improving our customer satisfaction scores by just 2 points correlates to a 3% increase in customer retention. For Pacific Sky, that translates to approximately $28 million in annual revenue. The CFO raised an eyebrow, looking impressed despite herself. The head of operations, who had been one of the most vocal skeptics of the CEI, leaned forward. Your team identified the baggage handling issue at Terminal 3? We've been trying to pinpoint that problem for months. Lisa nodded. One of my team members spent 3 full days just observing the baggage process from drop-off to carousel. Sometimes you need human eyes to spot what the metrics miss. The discussion continued for another hour, with executives asking pointed questions and Lisa addressing them with growing confidence. When the meeting finally ended, Tom remained seated as others filed out, several stopping to congratulate Lisa on her presentation. When they were alone, he smiled broadly. Well done. Really well done. You had them at the baggage handling revelation that's been driving operations crazy for ages. Lisa exhaled deeply, the tension of the past week finally releasing. Thank you for giving me the chance to do this. 6 months ago, I was serving drinks at 30,000 feet. Now I'm presenting to C-suite executives. And which do you prefer? Tom asked with genuine curiosity. Lisa considered the question. They're more similar than you'd think. Both require understanding what people need before they ask for it, solving problems quickly and keeping your balance when things get turbulent. She smiled. But I don't miss the 4 a.m. wake-up calls, Tom laughed. Fair enough. His expression grew more serious. The board has approved expanding the CEI to all major hubs. You'll need to grow your team significantly. Think you're ready for that? Lisa thought about how far she'd come in 6 months, from being terrified on her first day to confidently facing down the company's most intimidating executives. Yes, she said with conviction. I'm ready. As she gathered her presentation materials, Lisa's phone buzzed with messages from her team, eager to hear how the meeting had gone. She quickly texted back, "They approved the full expansion. Celebration dinner tonight." Walking back to her office, Lisa passed the wall of photographs in the main hallway, the company's history captured in images of planes, founders, and milestone moments. A newly installed photo showed Tom standing with the original CEI team at the Chicago hub launch. Lisa was in the center beside him, looking slightly shell-shocked but smiling. The caption read, Customer Experience Initiative Launch, where coffee spills lead to company transformation. Lisa paused to look at the photo, remembering her panic that day on the plane when the turbulence hit and coffee went everywhere. If someone had told her then that the mishap would change her entire career trajectory, she would have thought they were crazy. Back in her office, she found a small gift bag on her desk with a card from Tom. Inside the bag was a handsome travel mug with a sealed lid. The card simply read, "For future flights, spill-proof, I promise." Congratulations on a job well done. Lisa laughed, placing the mug prominently on her desk. It would serve as a daily reminder that sometimes the most embarrassing moments could lead to the greatest opportunities, especially if you were willing to learn, grow, and occasionally wear coffee-stained jeans to work. 2 years to the day after Lisa spilled coffee on Tom Harrington, she found herself standing in Terminal C of O'Hare International Airport. Behind her stood her expanded team, now 30 people strong with representatives at every major Pacific Sky hub across the country. "Are we really doing this?" asked Miguel, her deputy director who had joined the Customer Experience Initiative 9 months earlier after a decade in hotel management. "Absolutely," Lisa replied, checking her watch. "It's tradition now." The tradition had begun on the 1-year anniversary of what everyone at headquarters now referred to simply as the coffee incident. Tom had suggested they commemorate the day by taking an economy flight together, him again in jeans and a sweater, Lisa bringing along a tray of coffee cups filled with water. That first anniversary flight had been just the two of them, a symbolic acknowledgement of how a random moment of turbulence had changed both their trajectories. This year, with the CEI's success making headlines in the airline industry, Tom had suggested something bigger. Flight 372 from Chicago to New York, now boarding at gate C-17, announced the gate agent over the loudspeaker. Lisa smiled. The same flight number, the same route. But so much had changed since that day 2 years ago. Pacific Sky Airways had transformed from a struggling mid-tier airline into an industry leader in customer satisfaction. The changes that had begun with Lisa's team had spread throughout the company, creating a culture where everyone from baggage handlers to pilots understood that their job wasn't just about moving planes. It was about moving people. "There he is," Miguel said, nodding toward the gate where Tom was arriving, again dressed in jeans and a gray sweater that looked suspiciously similar to the one from that fateful day. "Right on time," Lisa said, checking her watch. Tom had insisted on maintaining the authenticity of the recreation, arriving separately as a regular passenger would. "Ready for takeoff?" Tom asked with a grin when he reached them. "I've been practicing my surprised face for when you dump coffee on me again." Lisa laughed. "No repeats this time. I think once was enough for both our careers." The CEI team boarded the plane first, each assigned to different sections to observe the passenger experience from multiple perspectives. As part of today's anniversary event, they were conducting a company-wide training day, sharing their observation techniques with flight attendants, gate agents, and other frontline staff who would carry these practices forward in their daily work. Lisa and Tom boarded last, taking seats 14C and 14D, the exact location of the original incident. As they settled in, Lisa couldn't help but reflect on how far they'd come. In the early days of the CEI, she'd faced significant skepticism. Customer experience sounded to many like a fuzzy concept that couldn't be measured or improved in any meaningful way. But over time, the results had spoken for themselves. Passenger complaints had dropped by 40%. Social media sentiment had shifted from predominantly negative to overwhelmingly positive. Most importantly, customer retention had increased by nearly 8%, almost triple Lisa's initial projection. "Penny for your thoughts," Tom said as he buckled his seatbelt. "Just thinking about the journey," Lisa replied. "Not just mine, but the company's. 2 years ago, most of the executives thought the CEI was just a pet project that wouldn't last 6 months. Tom nodded. The airline industry has been stuck in the same mindset for decades, cutting costs, packing in more seats, treating passengers like self-loading cargo. He glanced around the cabin. "What you've done is remind everyone that there are actual humans on these planes." The flight attendant, a veteran named Betty who had been with Pacific Sky for nearly 20 years, approached their row with a warm smile of recognition. "Mr. Harrington, Ms. Turner, welcome aboard. Can I get you anything before takeoff? Coffee, perhaps?" She delivered the last line with a knowing wink. "I think I'll pass on the coffee this time," Tom said with a laugh. "But thank you, Betty." As the plane prepared for takeoff, Lisa noticed the subtle changes throughout the cabin that had resulted from her team's work over the past 2 years. The seat pocket materials had been redesigned based on actual usage patterns. The safety demonstration included clearer language suggested by passengers. Even the boarding process had been reconfigured after CEI team members spent weeks observing the pain points. "You know," Tom said as the plane taxied toward the runway, "when I bought this airline, everyone thought I was crazy. Pacific Sky was losing money, had terrible customer reviews, and employee morale was at rock bottom." Lisa nodded. She'd heard parts of this story before, but never the full version. "My advisors all said the same thing. Cut routes, reduce staff, squeeze more fees from passengers, the usual airline playbook," Tom continued. "But I kept thinking about how miserable flying had become. The experience was broken, not the business model." "So what made you take the risk?" Lisa asked. Tom considered the question as the engines roared and the plane began its takeoff roll. I'd built my fortune in tech companies where user experience was everything. I figured the same principles should apply to airlines. People aren't just statistics on a spreadsheet. They're individuals with needs, frustrations, and expectations. The plane lifted off smoothly, banking toward New York as it climbed. But even with that vision, Tom admitted, I struggled to make it reality. The industry veterans I hired were too entrenched in traditional thinking. We made some progress, but not enough. He smiled at Lisa. Then I got coffee dumped on me by a flight attendant who cared more about the passenger than about covering her mistake, and suddenly I found exactly the perspective we needed. Lisa felt a familiar warmth in her cheeks. Even after 2 years, Tom's praise still made her slightly uncomfortable. You took a big chance on me, she said. I had no management experience, no business degree, nothing that qualified me for that role. That's where you're wrong, Tom countered. You had the most important qualification. You understood what it meant to be on the front lines. You knew our customers because you interacted with them every day. All the MBAs in the world can't teach that kind of insight. The plane leveled off at cruising altitude, and Betty returned with drinks, water for both of them, served with a smile that reached her eyes. The flight crew had been among the most enthusiastic supporters of the CEI, perhaps because they saw their own daily frustrations being addressed alongside those of passengers. Across the aisle, Lisa noticed Miguel deep in conversation with a passenger who was sharing feedback about the airline's mobile app. Further up, another team member was discreetly observing how people navigated the limited space of their seats. Every interaction, every friction point, every moment of the journey was being studied not as data, but as human experience. So what's next? Tom asked, bringing Lisa's attention back to their conversation. We've transformed Pacific Sky. Where do you go from here? It was a question Lisa had been pondering herself. The success of the CEI had attracted attention throughout the industry. She'd received speaking invitations from airline conferences, consulting offers from other carriers, even a few discreet job inquiries from competitors. I've been thinking about that, Lisa admitted. The work we've done here has made such a difference. But there's still so much broken in the way people travel, not just on planes but throughout the entire journey. Tom nodded encouragingly. Go on. What if we expanded beyond airlines? Lisa suggested, the idea crystallizing as she spoke. The CEI approach could work for hotels, rental car companies, even entire airports. We could create a travel experience consultancy that helps transform the industry as a whole. Tom's eyes lit up. A bigger mission. Exactly. Because ultimately this has never really been about Pacific Sky specifically. It's been about remembering that behind every ticket, every reservation, every journey is a human being with hopes and anxieties and needs. As their flight continued eastward, they delved deeper into the possibility, sketching ideas on napkins just as they had in the early days of the CEI. By the time the plane began its descent into New York, they had outlined the framework for a new venture, one that would take the lessons from Pacific Sky and apply them across the travel industry. Travel Experience Partners, Tom said, looking at the name they had written. I like it. Pacific Sky could be the first client and proof of concept. Lisa felt that familiar mix of excitement and terror that came with new beginnings. It's a big leap. Bigger than moving from flight attendant to corporate executive? Tom asked with a raised eyebrow. Lisa laughed. Fair point. As the wheels touched down at JFK, Lisa thought about the nervous flight attendant she'd been 2 years ago, worried about her job after a simple mistake, never imagining how that moment would reshape her entire career. The plane taxied to the gate, and passengers began gathering their belongings. Lisa and Tom remained seated, letting others deplane first as they finalized the outline of their new vision. You know, Tom said as they finally stood to leave, most business success stories start with careful planning, strategic thinking, and flawless execution. Ours started with spilled coffee and turbulence. Lisa smiled, remembering her panic in that moment. I guess sometimes the best journeys don't follow the expected flight plan. As they walked together into the terminal where the rest of the CEI team was gathering, Lisa felt a profound sense of gratitude. In the unpredictable turbulence of life, sometimes what feels like your worst mistake can become your greatest opportunity. especially when you're fortunate enough to spill coffee on someone who sees beyond the stains to the possibilities underneath.